Are women really more emotional than men? From the time cute little baby boys and girls are born, actually before they're born, from the time they're in the womb, there are hardwired differences in the way that they operate the emotional equipment that's written in their DNA. By the time preschool years roll around, some pretty stark differences between the expression and experience of emotions arise. And the gap between what boys and girls do and say only grow from this point on. So let's start from the very beginning, see how things change, and try to answer the question about who's more emotional and why. Researchers at Emory University compared about 4 dozen boys and girls in the womb. To see if they differed in the ways that they reacted to and managed stress, the researchers did something simple: stress them babies out. And lo and behold, there were gender-based differences between them. On average, the boy fetuses moved around more in response to stress. They had a higher change in heart rate and released much more of the stress hormone cortisol than girls did. This demonstrates that from the earliest moments of life, way before we're socialized to be different, there are physiological and behavioral differences in how the sexes respond to stress. Fast forward to delivery date, from birth to about 15 months, male babies are fussier, more irritable, they cry and grimace more in response to stress, are more easily scared, and more difficult to calm down than girls are. Throughout infancy, baby boys produce more cortisol in response to any negative stimuli, have a harder time reducing it, and therefore a more difficult time regulating stress. Toddler boys are also more vulnerable to negative social stimuli, in particular the kind that arises when their moms are stressed out. Girls seem to have more built-in chemical and neurological defense systems against this kind of stress. For example, there's evidence that girls' brains mitigate or calm down the flight or fight response to a greater degree. At about 3 years old, boys do start to express emotions less dramatically than girls do, largely because of a developmental upgrade to a brain region called the orbital frontal cortex, one heavily involved in the regulation of emotions. By the time they enter preschool, boys still lag behind girls, who by now express less negative emotions than boys do and are better at regulating those emotions and the inappropriate behaviors that come with them. Fast forward to grade school, and there's still evidence that girls are the emotional elite. Boys are in some cases 5 times more likely to act out in school and exhibit behavioral problems associated with emotional regulation, like ADHD, even when you pay boys and girls to regulate their emotions. Okay, so psychologists conducted this experiment where they paid kids to hide a negative reaction that they had to a gift that they didn't want. Boys struggled with this much more so than girls and forfeited that money much more often. Finally, when we compare 10-year-old boys to 10-year-old girls, we find that on average, girls are more emotionally intelligent than boys. They show empathy and other pro-social emotions more and have larger emotional vocabularies. By this point, girls have simply talked about emotions more with their parents and their friends, so they understand them better and therefore know how to control them to a greater degree. But alas, the emotional tendencies of boys and girls change drastically by the time they become young men and women. Indeed, from the onset of puberty on, women respond more emotionally to both positive and negative stimuli. They now release higher and more enduring levels of cortisol when stressed out, and they express nearly every emotion except anger more intensely than men do. As a sort of hallmark from their childhood, when men grow up, they simply focus less on emotions. They're more adept than women at concealing their emotional state and are less likely to be diagnosed with emotional disorders like anxiety or depression. So things definitely change. But why is that? What is it that transforms emotionally resilient girls into them crying crybabies that we see on TV? And what makes men, formerly our star crybabies, the emotional minimalists that they come to be? I'm gonna tell you in part 2 of this brain snack. Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss it.